All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're embarking on a pretty fascinating journey through the history of what we drink. We are going to trace the entire evolution of alcohol, starting way back with the basic, kind of serendipitous chemistry of ancient fermentation, and traveling right through to the wild, meticulously crafted lore of modern mixology. Get ready, because the history of your favorite drink is a lot stranger and definitely a lot funnier than you probably think.
So, what do an 1874 viral prank, a prescription for malaria, and a horse's rear end all have in common? I know, it sounds like the setup to a bizarre joke, but these are actually foundational chapters in the story of the modern cocktail. Today, we're going to unpack the weird, myth-filled, and honestly brilliant history of how humans have engineered, regulated, and marketed alcohol across the centuries.
You know, to really understand the cocktail, we have to understand where alcohol actually started. And the funny thing is, alcohol wasn't so much invented as it was discovered by happy accident. Fermentation literally predates recorded history. In 7000 BCE, molecular archaeologists actually found chemical evidence of a mixed mead and rice fermentation in China's Yellow River Valley. By 6000 BCE, folks in the Republic of Georgia were fermenting wine in these massive egg-shaped clay jars buried right in the dirt. Fast forward to 1516 CE, and we see human engineering really step in with the Bavarian beer purity law. It restricted beer to just water, barley, and hops. And get this, it is the oldest food regulation still in force today. Now, as we humans mastered fermentation, we really started pushing it to extreme physical limits. Take sake, for example. It uses a technique called multiple parallel fermentation, which basically means converting starch to sugar and sugar to alcohol at the exact same time. That process exists nowhere else in the world. For premium sake, they physically polish away the outside of the rice grain to remove impurities. And there's a brewery in Japan that produces a sake where they polish away an astonishing 99.15% of the grain. Think about that. They are brewing with less than 1% of the original rice. Just incredible.
But here's the thing. To get to the modern cocktail, we needed something way stronger than standard fermentation could provide. This required a massive, game-changing leap: distillation. See, fermentation alone only gets you to the alcohol levels of beer, around 5.5%, or wine, around 12.5%. Distillation changed the whole shebang. By applying heat and literally stripping away water, human-engineered distillation skyrocketed alcohol by volume. It created spirits that averaged around 40 to 50%. Distillation finally gave us the powerful base ingredients we needed for actual mixology.
Once these high-proof spirits were born, humanity couldn't quite agree on the rules. On one hand, you have cognac. This is arguably the most regulated brandy in the world. It must be made in this specific tiny region in France, mostly from one type of grape, double distilled in specific copper pots, aged in specific oak. It's super rigid and law-bound. But, on the other hand, you have rum. Rum has absolutely zero global legal definition. It is the Wild West of the spirit world, with rules varying wildly depending on what country you're in. Actually, it was so loosely defined that for over 2 centuries, the British Royal Navy literally just handed out daily rations of it to their sailors. With all these global spirits floating around, I want you to guess what the best-selling spirit in the world actually is. Go on, guess. It's not tequila, it's not vodka, it's definitely not whiskey. It's Jinro Soju. Just wrap your head around this massive number. 96.8 million 9-liter cases sold worldwide in a single year. Produced over in South Korea, this clear spirit absolutely dominates global consumption. And that's largely because it sits at a really highly drinkable 13 to 25% alcohol, making it perfect for sipping straight throughout a meal. It outpaces global tequila sales by more than double.
Okay, but what happens when you push distillation as far as the literal laws of physics will allow? Well, you get Polmo Spiritus. This is a Polish rectified spirit bottled at 96% alcohol. That's 192 proof. This is the practical physical ceiling for conventional distillation because if you try to go any higher, the ethanol fundamentally bonds with water. This stuff is so dangerously strong and neutral that during the early days of the 2020 pandemic, it saw a massive surge in sales. But not because people were drinking it. People were literally using it as the base ingredient to make homemade hand sanitizer. Wowed, right?
So we have the ancient history, we've got the science, and we've got the raw spirits. But how in the world did we get from straight, burning alcohol to the beautifully crafted menus we see today? It all comes down to one pivotal question. Where did the word cocktail actually come from? The truth is, the whole era of mixology is built on a foundation of wonderful, vibrant mystery.
Because honestly, history is messy, and there are dozens of myths out there. One theory says it comes from the French word coquetier, meaning a little egg cup that drinks were supposedly served in. Another claims it's a corruption of an Aztec noble's name, or that it's named after rooster feathers used as garnishes. But the wildest, and frankly most hilarious theory, the docked horsetail. Yep. In the 18th century, a horse with a clipped or cocked tail meant it was a mixed breed. To make these mixed breed horses look peppy for sale, shady sellers would literally shove spices, mostly ginger, up the horse's rear end. So a cocktail became slang for a mixed, impure drink spiked with spices to give the drinker a bit of artificial vigor. Gross? Absolutely, but totally unforgettable.
Regardless of where the word came from, we actually do know exactly when it was first defined in print. In 1806, an upstate New York newspaper defined a cocktail as a stimulating liquor composed of spirits of any kind, sugar, water, and bitters. Now, what makes that 1806 definition so incredibly special is that it isn't just some generic description. It is literally the exact recipe for what we now call an old-fashioned. Every single cocktail invented since 1806 is simply a deviation from this foundational, perfectly balanced four-ingredient formula. As bartenders evolved this formula over the years, the structural mechanics of exactly how you mix those ingredients became a science of its own. Shaking a drink aerates it, clouds the liquid, and adds this nice frothy texture, which is absolutely essential for drinks with heavy citrus or egg whites. Stirring, however, is meant for spirit-forward drinks. It keeps the texture silky, the liquid crystal clear, and the temperature perfectly precise. Which brings up a pretty great fun fact. When James Bond notoriously orders his vodka martinis shaken, not stirred, he is technically ruining his drink by clouding the clarity and diluting it way too fast. Sorry, 007.
But beyond the science of shaking and stirring, a lot of the world's most famous cocktails weren't invented by bartenders at all. They were actually invented by doctors. The classic gin and tonic only exists because an 18th century doctor in India figured out that intensely bitter quinine could cure malaria. The British military just added gin and sugar to make the bitter medicine palatable. Similarly, the whiskey sour was born out of sailors mixing spirits with citrus to prevent scurvy. If you really think about it, the modern cocktail menu is secretly just a 19th century pharmacy.
Sometimes, though, mixology isn't medicine. Sometimes it's just pure, accidental practicality. Back in the 1940s, American oil engineers working over in the Persian Gulf wanted to spike their orange juice with vodka. The only problem? They didn't have a spoon. So they simply reached into their toolboxes and stirred their drinks with an actual, literal screwdriver. Probably not the most sanitary choice, but the name stuck permanently, proving that sometimes the absolute best drink names are completely literal.
Other times, a famous drink is born from just one single legendary customer request. Get this, wake me up and then mess me up. In 1983, a model walked into a London bar and gave the bartender Dick Bradsell those exact instructions. By combining vodka, fresh espresso, and coffee liqueur, he was aiming for the perfect contrast of cold temperature and intense, caffeinated aroma. And with that single, highly specific demand, the globally beloved espresso martini was born right on the spot.
Now, as the cocktail industry grew, it basically became a masterclass in marketing and myth-making. Take the Tom Collins. This super refreshing gin highball owes its immense popularity to a viral 19th century prank. Here's how it worked. Step 1. Walk up to a gullible friend and tell them a guy named Tom Collins is saying terrible things about them. Step 2. Tell them Tom is over at the bar across town. Step 3. Your angry friend storms into the bar, demanding to see Tom Collins. And the bartender, who is completely in on the joke, simply slides them a tall, iced gin and lemon drink. It was a nationwide troll job that permanently cemented the cocktail in history.
And hey, speaking of brilliant marketing, we absolutely have to talk about the Cosmopolitan. It blew up in the 90s as this huge pop culture icon, famous for that bright pink glow. But structurally, the cranberry juice is doing almost nothing for the flavor. It is purely there for that iconic visual color. It's actually the fresh lime juice that's doing all the heavy lifting, providing the necessary acidity to stop the triple sec from making the drink way too sweet. So beneath all the glamour, the Cosmo is just a perfectly balanced classic sour.
That idea of structural balance brings us perfectly to the margarita. Have you ever wondered why it has a salt rim? It's really not just a pretty aesthetic decoration, it is a highly calculated chemical trick. When salt hits your tongue, it chemically suppresses your palate's ability to perceive bitterness, and that in turn artificially amplifies the sweet and tart notes of the fresh lime juice in every single sip. The rim is literally hacking your brain, tricking it into enjoying the drink more.
Okay, now, if you want the ultimate example of marketing smoke and mirrors in the alcohol world, look no further than Grey Goose Vodka. You probably think of it as this historic, luxury French brand, right? Well, the reality is, it was entirely invented in 1997 by an American entrepreneur named Sidney Frank. France had absolutely zero historical vodka-making tradition. Frank just decided to make it in the Cognac region, slap a completely manufactured heritage on the bottle, and purposely price it at $30, nearly double the competition. He knew consumers would blindly equate a higher price with higher quality. And it worked. 7 years later, he sold his totally fabricated brand for $2.2 billion. Unbelievable.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? From the chemical marvel of multiple parallel fermentation over in Japan, to 18th century malaria medicine, to literal horses' tails and billion-dollar marketing stunts, the world of alcohol is this incredible, messy blend of fact, flavor, and complete fiction. Which brings us to our final thought for the day. The next time you sit down, look at a menu and order your favorite cocktail, ask yourself, are you tasting genuine history, or are you just happily falling for a very, very well-marketed story? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I hope it gave you plenty to chew on, or, sip on. Catch you next time.